Hello and welcome to Be Yoga Live with Jenny B. I'm your host, Jenny B, coming to you from Montreal, Canada. And today our guest is also called Jennifer, and she is also coming to you from Montreal, Canada. So happy today that Jennifer Maagendans is here with us from Yoga Luna. Luna Yoga. She's the owner and director at Luna, which some of you who are here or maybe elsewhere in the country or planet might know this studio, which is one of the most beautiful studios that I've come across living here in the city. And she's literally coming to us from Luna today. And she's found herself, I think, if I recognize the background, it looks like she's in the change room of her studio. What's going on there, Jennifer?
I am in the changing room, Jenny. I had planned to do it in the studio, and then we got a private class booked in the studio. So one of our other teachers is teaching in the studio. And then I said, well, I'll just do it in the hallway because we have this nice little couch there and it's cozy. And they decided to rip up all the carpets in our hallway this week. And so you might hear a little banging in the background, a lot of swearing. There's definitely swearing out there. And but we'll have beautiful carpets by the end of it. So I'm hiding out in the women's changing room.
Wonderful. It's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here. The swearing is funny. I don't know if anybody caught the show that I did last week, which is today is a continuation of the theme of ahimsa. And last week we were talking about ahimsa, nonviolence, and what that means for specifically that, for swearing. So maybe we'll see what kind of potty mouths the guys have out there. And
yeah. It's a good combination of French and English swears. It's mainly English so far, but the French swears are coming out too. Perfect
Montreal combination. That's great. So today, Jennifer's here to talk to us about yoga and vegetarian diet. And we'll ask her for her personal experience. Before we start talking about diet, though, Jennifer, I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit of background on yourself, how you found yoga, and how you specifically found Jivamukti yoga, and why that style of yoga is maybe different than some of the other styles of yoga that other people might know, perhaps a little bit more, and why that makes you a really great candidate to talk about this subject.
Sure. Yeah. So I got into yoga in probably my early 20s when I was in university, and I was, dealing with, being on my own. Actually, I just moved in with my boyfriend, Jason, and living university life, and just needed something of my own. And I don't know, something outside of school. And they were offering yoga there. So it was called Hatha yoga classes. And so I signed up for, I don't know, a 6-week course or something. I think it was $30 for the entire 6 weeks. And just really connected with it, really loved it right away. I did do gymnastics when I was a kid. So yoga just came very naturally to me, and just felt like it was something I was missing, that I had kind of experienced with gymnastics, similar movements. And so got into it then, and then sort of got a bit more serious about it. And I discovered Jivamukti yoga, it was probably about 2005 or so. And I was going to, I don't know if you remember, but they used to do the yoga conference in Toronto. Actually, I think they still do it every year. And I went with a girlfriend of mine, and she said, well, you choose one workshop and I'll choose the other. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to choose Dharma Mitra, because I wanted something very traditional and more old school. And I wanted an Indian teacher, which I later found out that Dharma Mitra wasn't Indian, he's Brazilian. So that was quite hilarious. And she wanted to do this Jivamukti class with David Life, which I was like, sure, I'll do it, to try to be open-minded. But I think in my mind, I was thinking this is a bit of a joke. All the Hollywood stars do it. I think Sting was doing it, Madonna, some stars. So I didn't take it that seriously. And did the Dharma Mitra workshop, loved Dharma Mitra, but, when I went into David Life's workshop, first of all, the music was so loud that the security guard was there telling David to turn down the music. I think he was playing Sting or the Police, and he was handing out animal rights flyers on everybody's yoga mats. And he had tattoos, and his hair was dyed, and just looked different than your traditional yogi. And by the end of the class, I fell in love with the style, with his style of teaching. it's just this great combination of philosophy, and you have some of the chanting, but at the same time, you've got like a really strong physical practice. And that's what I found with a lot of styles. It was like either you had power yoga where you got this great workout, but zero spirituality. It felt just more aerobic, or you had, you know, something where people were lighting candles and there was a lot of tarot cards and it was like barely any physical. And so I think that was the main draw for me for Jivamukti, was it just sort of combined everything. And Sharon and David, the founders, are from New York. So they're, you know, living the life that similar to what I'm living in the city. And so they've kind of incorporated all the yoga principles into a modern lifestyle. And that's, I think, what really drew me to it.
Wow,
And the music as well. They love to play great music.
Yeah, can you explain? Because I definitely have taken a number of classes at your studio, and that's a fun part of it that we don't always have in all the studios. Is that part of it? Is that something that is incorporated in the trainings to show people how to put together playlists, or is this?
You know, I don't think that they showed us how to make a good playlist or anything like that when I did the training with them. But we certainly do in our training. We kind of like go through the main tips and give them some ideas. And nowadays it's just so easy. You have Spotify, you know, you can look up other people's playlists or just find a couple songs that you like, and then it's going to suggest to you all this other great music. And the reason they put music in is just really about kind of a form of nada yoga, of sound, and using sound to inspire you and inspire your practice. And music's always been a big part of my life. My partner, Jason, is a musician, and music just makes me feel good, and it can change my mood so quickly, and it can really either calm me or energize me. So I think it's a great combination with the asana practice, the music, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, just waves or you know, sounds of birds that we often hear in yoga classes, but we play like the Beatles, or play Moby, or, you know, whatever kind of is going with the theme of the month, or just the mood of the class.
Thank you so much. When you were talking about the animal rights flyers that were being passed out at David Life's workshop that you took, I mean, like I've said, that's one of the things I have in my mind when I think of Jivamukti Yoga, and I honestly don't know too much. But veganism pops to my mind as something that's really important. And in the studying that I've done and what I understand, the yogic diet tends to be traditionally vegetarian, not vegan. Yeah, so I guess I'll ask you first off, are you vegan?
So I'm like, I would say a 99% vegan. And the reason I say I'm 99% vegan is because, I mean, I've definitely gone through stages in my life where I was, you know, at the beginning I was just vegetarian, and then I was hardcore vegan. Definitely during the Jivamukti training and the years following was 100% vegan. I feel like I've become just more relaxed in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, in that when you're out and you're, you know, trying to eat vegan, it can be really challenging. I mean, it's much easier now, but like 20 years ago, it was almost unheard of. So if I'm out at a restaurant and they don't have any vegan options, I'll just take the vegetarian option and ask them to do it without cheese. And if they can't do it without cheese, I'll just, you know, take the cheese out. But I also found that, like, often when I would go to dinner parties, I would have, you know, most of my friends, this is back like 10, 20 years ago, were not vegetarian. And so if they went out of their way to make me a vegetarian meal, the last thing I wanted to do was complain and be like, sorry, I don't eat cheese as well. You know, like, I just felt like it's more important that I'm, you know, grateful that they made the effort to make me something vegetarian. It doesn't have to be vegan. So if I can eat vegan, I will 100%. I love vegan food. But in those times where it's not available, then I'm pretty relaxed about it.
But that 1% doesn't mean that you're off having, you know, a meal at the keg either. It's not 99% vegan and 1% beef.
No.
What I hear. You're doing your best, and most of the time it works. And definitely traveling. I've been vegetarian off and on, but mostly on since I was 12 years old. And I spent some months in South America. And it was very hard to even eat vegetarian in South America. I would say, you know, oh, I'm vegetarian, and they would bring me chicken. It's like,
yes.
they were thinking of just not red meat. So it ended up being, eggs and rice pretty much every day that I was there.
Yep.
And you're in these places where, again, you need to find the gratitude for what's being put in front of you. And sometimes there really are, there are no options.
Yeah.
But it is where I discovered quinoa before I was down in South America, and before, we all know what quinoa is now, but I had never really seen or tasted quinoa back then, and ended up on some little island. I can't even remember what country I was in, and that was what they had. That was how everybody survived. There was no room or money to raise cows. They were living very happily on a vegetarian diet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what happens exactly to me too. When I was in Mexico, I remember learning a couple words in Spanish, and one of them was no carne, like no meat, please, and then it was always like polo, like you want, but what about chicken, and they were just like, no meat at all, but what about fish? And I was like, no. And it was just, it can be a challenge. They're sort of like, what are we going to feed you, and same thing. We ended up eating a lot of rice and beans, but then there was a lot of cheese on stuff. And to be honest, I'm pretty lactose intolerant. I think that sort of came with becoming vegetarian, or maybe I was lactose intolerant before I became vegetarian too, and maybe just didn't clue onto it. But so eating dairy just doesn't sit well with me anyway. But I can handle it a little bit. I'm not so severe, but I just prefer not to.
And what about your kids? You have 2 boys, and your kids are relatively the same age as mine. Have you raised them vegan?
I haven't. So that's definitely an interesting and very controversial topic, in that, when I was pregnant, I was vegan, and I just had a lot of pressure from people like, oh, what are you doing to your baby and your fetus? And they need a certain amount of milk, or I think my mom was like convinced that I needed to eat eggs. So I think when I was at her house, I'd be like, okay, mom, I'll have an egg, but same thing when they were babies. I was raising them vegan at first and trying to do as much research as I can. And of course, all the people who are vegan will tell you it's 100% healthy and absolutely no problem, you can do it. And then all the people who aren't vegan will tell you the exact opposite. Your baby needs milk and all this stuff. So I just found like I was really confused, and it's a hard time when you're raising a kid and it's one thing to make decisions about your own body, but about your child's body. So I did. My first son, Levi, I raised him vegan until he went to daycare. And then I had written on all the forms, he's vegetarian and everything. And I would even bring them, I think it was soy milk that I was bringing them at the time, to the daycare. And then one day I said, did you need more milk? And they said, no, he's drinking the dairy milk. It's fine. So it wasn't really my choice. They just kind of gave him dairy milk and didn't even think that it was anything. I mean, this was 9 years ago. I think now there's maybe a bit more consciousness about it, and a bit more consciousness on allergies, but this daycare happened to just give him dairy. And then at the same time, we went to Cuba for a week, and they just didn't have any non-dairy milk. So at the time, little kids are constantly drinking milk. So he drank dairy milk in Cuba too. And then when we came back, he just, switched to it and didn't want to go back to soy or almond or whatever it was I was giving to him at the time. So my intention, I think, was to raise them vegan, but not strict. And then those things just happened and changed. And, it's challenging to have your kids be vegetarian already, because they're seen as different. And as you know, when you send your kids to school, they just randomly give them snacks and milk boxes and things like that. But I have to say that my kids have sort of made the choice themselves to be vegetarian, because the daycare worker at one point did try to give my son Levi meat, and he just refused on his own. And I think he was 1.5 at that time. Mm-hmm. And the milk boxes, both of them say, no, thank you at school. And I haven't told them to do that. I sort of want them to make up their own mind, about it. And in fact, I just found out last night, Levi's science teacher is telling us that they're going to be eating snails in science class next week. And so Levi's sort of like, oh, no, I don't want to eat snails. And I'm like, it's totally up to you. You decide what you want to do. But it's much easier now than it used to be. I have to say they're not the only vegetarians in the class at this point. There's a couple of them now, but vegan is quite challenging. So often what happens is I'll make a vegan meal, like I'll make a Tex-Mex vegan casserole that they love, and then they'll grate some mozzarella on top of it. And, That's okay. They're happy. I'm happy.
Nice, thank you. I raised my kids eating meat, and their dad eats meat. I didn't raise them eating meat. We were a house where there was always meat and vegetarian options, and
Okay.
there always, it always has been that way. And 2 years ago, we went up. The kids and I went up to the Valmarin ashram, the Shivananda ashram, and it's of course all vegetarian food there. And there was just such a beautiful variety of food that was the time where my daughter, who was I guess 7 or 8 at that time, decided to stop eating it. And I was great, because then I had an ally at home, and then I was like, okay, I'm not cooking meat for anybody. If you boys want to eat it, go for it. And she's like a hardcore vegetarian. If I'm gonna have poutine, so vegetarian, not vegan. If I'm gonna have poutine, and the gravy is what it is. But my kid will, look at the box, package of everything. And I asked her last night, I was like, why? She said a few funny things. I was like, why are you vegetarian? And she said, I don't like the way that meat feels in my mouth or my stomach. I'm like, oh, is that it? She's like, Mom, it's just messed up. So her judgment, she thinks it's just messed up. And I think a lot of people might agree.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, obviously, more people would disagree and think that it's normal and natural. But when we bring this back to ahimsa and that translation of nonviolence and not harming, I think it's quite hard for anybody to convince me that we can kill an animal for food in a nonviolent way. I don't know that exists. So I'm assuming, and again, I haven't been through a Jivamukti training or what exactly the dialogue is with that, but I'm assuming that the idea is we also can't take animal products, whether it's eggs or even honey, in a way that doesn't harm animals. Is that the thinking behind the yoga diet being more vegan than vegetarian?
Yes. Yeah. So ahimsa is one of the 5 tenets in Jivamukti, and it's a very important one in Jivamukti. And it's about causing the least amount of harm that you can. And so eating animals definitely causes harm, and eating animal products. And so one of the things that they do during the Jivamukti training is they show you a bunch of videos. Now, keep in mind, I did it more than 10 years ago, so maybe the videos have changed at this point, but a lot of videos about factory farming and the way the animals are raised and the lifestyle that they lead. And I don't know if you've ever seen that movie Earthlings. Have you seen that? Anyway, all these movies, have you seen any of those movies? It's just so heartbreaking to see the way animals are treated in factory farms. Like it's one thing to have like a farm where an animal like has a nice life and is outside and grows up and has its babies close to it. But the factory farming is just so brutal, when you see these animals that are stuck in a cage their whole lives and never move, and they're going crazy. And it's after you watch those films, you're like, I'm never eating any meat ever again. And Sharon, especially the founder of Jivamukti, she is very much vegan and very much a vegan, I want to say almost like a vegan pusher. And the thing with Sharon and David is I love them both, and I absolutely love Jivamukti, but that way of pushing veganism on people doesn't speak to me. And I know that it pushed a lot of people away. So the people who are vegan love it, and they love the training. But there are a couple of people who were in my training who were not vegan, and they felt very just cut off, and they felt like it was like an attack on them. Because Sharon will say, if you eat meat, you're a murderer. You're murdering animals. So that's harsh. I think it's great. You need to have those really outspoken people to make a difference, and she has made a huge difference in so many people's lives. But when I teach Jivamukti, or when I talk about veganism in general, I'm always like, you do your best. And it can be a challenge, but it's also so much easier to eat vegan now than it used to be. And I don't feel like who am I to push my ideas on other people? As much as I think a vegan diet is the best diet for me, my dad would think that, eating meat and potatoes was the best diet for him, and he was very much a person who would judge my diet and, oh, is that vegetarian? You know, and all those things that you get. I got that from age like 16 and up. I would get every night, you know, oh, is yogurt vegan? Or I don't know, all this stuff. And I never wanted to be like that. I never wanted to be like, you should eat vegan, you know? So I kind of,
it becomes rebellious. I think anybody who's even teetering on the edge of going in that way, if you're hit with, I've seen enough angry vegans in my life that, you know, will go off on, you know, and that's just, to me, as violent as anything else. If you're attacking somebody who is probably doing their best to understand. And on that note, I'm wondering, so ahimsa, I hear often this argument for even, you know, yoga teacher friends that I have. Ahimsa means we also need self-care. And that sometimes becomes the argument for some people of why they do eat meat, believing that they need to take care of their bodies by nourishing themselves with meat. What do you think? What do you think about that?
I'm going to sort of quote Sharon on this, because a lot of people always ask this question. Ahimsa is one of the yamas, which is on how we treat others, and the niyamas are on yourself. If it's you know, if you're thinking of that and you're thinking of ahimsa, it's really how you treat others and other beings. And self-care for sure is part of yoga, and it's part of the yoga practice. I almost think it's like a little, you're trying to find a little way out of it. You interpret the yamas and niyamas, all the yoga practices, however, but that's how I see it. It's how you treat others.
Thank you. And what about other reasons that I can come up with? And it's not, I've never like even Googled like, why are yogis I just, you know, obviously know about yoga. So I'm thinking too of the tamasic nature of meat. And does that come up for you as well, of why somebody who's trying to live a more yogic lifestyle walk that path, the energetic properties of meat?
I mean, the energetic properties of meat, you mean like eating another being?
Yeah, and yeah, we can go there for sure. Yeah, even just the qualities of meat, which are heavy and very difficult to digest. Like for me, if we're working toward this sattvic lifestyle, you're eating something that, you know, again, I use the word poutine, and I don't particularly love poutine, but that's a very heavy, you know, it's not a kale salad.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We have the poutine night at our house often too. I can relate to the poutine, but yeah, eating meat is definitely heavy, and it's harder on your body and on your colon, especially too, right? They've really linked that. There's a lot of health effects to eating meat. But then there's also a lot of, you know, health effects to eating too much sugar, and there's health effects to eating too much tofu. And I don't know, there's so much different information out there, and each of us is so different that I think you have to kind of just think, you know, how can I live the best, and how can I cause the least amount of harm, and look at your own values. And as a vegan or as a meat eater, try not to be so judgmental of one another. That was one of the reasons that I said yes to talking to you about this podcast today, is because normally veganism is like my least favorite topic. So it was so funny that you're like, can you talk about vegetarian veganism? I was like, oh God, because I know that every time it comes up, somebody takes it the wrong way, or somebody, you know, people are just so up in arms about it. They just almost want to fight each other. So I think it's good to come out and talk about it, and hopefully not hurt anybody's feelings, but, you know, bring it out into the open that you do your best.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Have you just, did you just finish up a yoga class? I wanted to maybe say, when I was looking on the website earlier, you guys are offering like a free week of yoga at Luna. Is that?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So yeah, I just finished teaching at 1:00. I teach the Friday Jivamukti class every week. But yeah, we're right now we're in lockdown, as you know, so all the studios kind of closed, but we are live streaming everything. And then we have all our classes like video on demand. And then we're still allowed to do in studio private classes. So that's why there's private class going on right now, where somebody's actually in the studio. And we're still allowed to keep our boutique open. So we occasionally get people coming in and out. But yeah, we're live streaming. And then we have that free week, like you said, on our website. We started that a couple months ago, just to let people get a taste of what it feels like to do yoga online.
And it is quite the different thing. It's not the same, right? So I don't know if you have a means to set up to set up music during the practice.
We do.
Is there music really? It's the people who are taking classes online with you are listening to those wonderful playlists.
Yes, yeah. So there's a way in Zoom that you can share the playlist. So we've been doing that, but I actually have a guy coming in about half an hour to set up a boom mic. We're getting like more and more professional the longer we stay in this lockdown. But yeah, we have
it is, isn't it? I started like, I'll teach a class on Facebook, and it was like, I think I have to get a better camera, and then okay, there's some lighting, and slowly, I think we're all realizing that even when the studio's open, the online thing is here to stay, and there are many benefits to it. There are people being able to access classes where, as you know, I teach prenatal and postnatal yoga, and they're often happy to not drag their 9-month mid-ends over and try to find parking and all this stuff.
Totally. I think it's great. I mean, I take the morning classes here, which I would never do. Normally they start at 7:30 in the morning. And for me to get here at 7:30 is not going to happen. But, I get the kids, my husband and I get the kids ready. He takes them to school. And while he's off taking them to school, then I just open my laptop and I do the morning class. So I think it's perfect.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to say on the topic before we sign out?
No, I just want to, say thanks for having me on the show. And again, that, the vegan diet, for those of you who are sort of thinking about it and questioning it, I think you need to think of it as not like, I'm going to do this for my whole life and change my entire lifestyle, but instead be like, I'm going to try vegan once a week or once a day and try different recipes. And I think that's what happened to me is I became vegetarian because I just didn't really like meat. And then it sort of evolved into eating less and less animal products and sort of became vegan, but it wasn't like, this is what I'm going to do with my life, because I think that's such a huge commitment. So just, take it in little bits and see what happens.
Ease into it instead of jumping in and then dropping the ball and then going back to eating steak 5 times a week or
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And just to finish off with a quote from my friend, Kimberly Wilson, who does a lot of courses on veganism and everything. And she said that actually the flexitarians, people who, eat some vegan or some vegetarian, some meat, different things, they're actually making a bigger difference in the world than the hardcore vegans, because the hardcore vegans are only, 1% of the population or something. But, and she's in the States, so she's talking about the Americans, people, but flexitarians are a much bigger percentage, so they're making a big difference.
So it's learning how to cut down, and even just the idea, like I sometimes, you see Meatless Monday and I'm like, oh my God, do people really eat meat 6 times a week?
Yeah.
At least that's the one time that, and to be honest, that you're saving a few bucks too. I think when people go toward a vegan or vegetarian diet or any change, it seems overwhelming, but you realize how, just like my daughter did at the ashram, just how varied, like there are so many other things we can eat that aren't meat, and it becomes second nature, and you don't, I always had this thing of like chicken, I was always worried when I would cook it for my family that I wasn't cooking it enough. Like you don't have to worry, you don't have to worry too much about that if you're serving lentils. I'm clicking on this here. There's a Luna Yoga Facebook vegan group. Thank you, dear Leah. For anyone who wants to exchange or find recipes, you don't need to be vegan.
Thank you, Leah. She's so sweet. Yeah, so Leah's one of our speakers. Who's on maternity leave right now. She just had a beautiful little boy. And so for November, for Vegan Month, it's World Vegan Month, we created this community Facebook group where, you don't have to be a member of Luna necessarily, but it's mostly our community who's just sharing recipes and ideas and websites.
Oh, wonderful. So that can be, so anybody who's listening, can they try to pop in that group and get some inspiration? Again, like Jennifer was saying, it doesn't need to be a 7 day a week, 365 days a year thing. Just exploring and just realizing how much, and I mean, vegan baking is a whole other thing. It's a whole wonderful world of cakes made out of chickpeas.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you?
No, it's great. All my baking is vegan. I'm constantly making vegan muffins every week for the kids for their lunchbox and granola bars and everything. And it is super easy.
Oh, yum. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So I wanted to invite you guys next week to join me. I'm on my own every second week. Lovely guest every second week. And then the weeks between, you're alone with me and my thoughts, which can be a funny or scary place, depending on the week, I suppose. And next week here on Friday, I'll be talking about impermanence, and really, really looking forward to that. If you would take some classes, like we said, that free introductory week at Luna, you can check out lunayoga.ca, and you can join that nice Facebook group that Leah was mentioning a moment ago, and maybe do some experimenting with the vegan diet. Please leave some questions and comments. If you want some other resources, I'm sure Jennifer would be happy to, I don't know, maybe put in a few websites you can check out if you're looking for recipes or more information. And look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care.
You too.